Hi guys, this is Kevin from News Rocky, coming to you live Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. from the 80 Broadway studio, Forward TV network. Today we're bringing you a special guest, and in fact a topic that is very current. As we approach the March anniversary of the 1999 NATO attacks on Serbia, we are going to have a guest with us today, Jovana, who is going to be talking to us about her experience, then 11 years old, talking about her experience during the bombings from NATO, how it was to be in Serbia at that time during this conflict. We'll also be talking about the experience of dealing with the international affairs of the United States and how they got involved then, and possibly what they feel in Serbia about the United States President Joe Biden today. All this and more on this special episode of News Rocky.
Update again. The next video I'll show you will be a highway bridge attacked in southern Serbia, 5 miles north of the Kosovo border. This is the Raska Bridge, F-15Es with 2,000-pound laser-guided bombs. This is at night. It looks like day because of the infrared, and he destroys that bridge.
When was this?
That was 3 days ago. We're not focusing on the population of the Serb civilian population. We're focusing on the military, and that's Milosevic's military. Any of those things that help him sustain his capability to engage in repressive acts against the Kosovo Albanians that has to do with military targeting is fair game. We've gone through those before.
And welcome back. This is Kevin from the News Rocky Show, and we are just so excited to have this guest coming to us today from Serbia. Jovana is somebody who has lived through the experience that most Americans cannot comprehend. They don't understand what happened during this 1999 NATO attacks that took place in her homeland. We're going to understand exactly the inside version of what was taking place, the bombs that were landing, the explosions that took place, the destruction, and unfortunately the deaths that took place with her people, the Serbians. I want to now bring on our special guest from Serbia. Jovana, welcome to the News Rocky Show, and how are you today in Serbia?
Hello, Kevin. Thank you for having me on your show today. It's great in Serbia, actually, these days.
Thank you so much. And so as I open, before we get into the experience that you went through, tell me a little bit. You're in Serbia here today, and you've been living there. How old are you? And tell me a little bit about you as the person who lives in Serbia. Where are you right now in Serbia before I kind of get on to the next form of questions?
Okay. So I'm 33 years old,
Yep.
and I live in Niš. It's a city of Niš on the south of the Serbia.
Yep.
So it's like the third city in Serbia. And now I'm Bachelor of Law, and I'm not doing the things that I studied to do. I picked a different career, and I'm working with you guys. I started to work with you a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
I met Peter then.
Mm-hmm.
And that is all for now.
Right. So let me, I kind of jumped into this, and I think it's been interesting. I've learned so much from talking to you about this topic. Quite frankly, in 1999, when this took place, I don't think most Americans were paying attention to what was going on. It certainly was a time when Bill Clinton was the president. We'll get into the politics in a little bit later in the show. I don't want to get into it now, but I just wanted to set the tone that I think the entire world really needs to hear this story. And I want to start from the beginning. I want to start from the day before the bombings, before the 78 days that you were locked down during this NATO attack. Tell me a little bit about what you remember then, your family, and what it was like the day before this event.
So yeah, about American Informed about this subject. When I talked to Peter and yourself, I was not surprised by the fact that you were not aware of things that were happening back then in 99. So it looked normal. We didn't know what is going to happen. We heard the rumors here and there. Maybe our parents wanted to protect us from those information. And we as a kids back then didn't know a lot about the things that were happening on Kosovo and in Serbia in general. So we didn't have the access to the internet as we do now. We didn't have the smartphones or something like that. So actually, we weren't informed or ready to the situation that happened on March 24th. So the day before the March 24th, it was like the regular day in spring in Serbia. And nothing looked like something is going to happen to us as a kids.
So you were how old at this time on the March 24th? I believe this conflict was 78 days. Officially, I think it was noted as March 25th of the beginning of this conflict to June 10th. And at 11 years old, birds are chirping. You're going to school, I assume.
Yes.
Life is
Yes.
normal. You live with mom and dad and your sister. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
And
so I was in 4th grade of elementary school. I was at the beginning of my dancing career, and it was all looked normal. Like we went to school and do our things as a kids.
Okay. So when you had this experience taking place, you're just, every day is no, and you say no real knowledge, at least you did know. Do you remember hearing about your president then, who was sort of in the middle of this conflict?
No.
And just for the viewers of News Rocky, could you name that president that was obviously then was after this whole conflict? We'll get into that, but was also brought up on some war crimes. But who was the actual sitting president in Serbia then, when you recall?
Slobodan Milosevic was his name. He's dead now.
Right.
And we will get into that subject a little bit later.
Perfect.
So the March 24th, we were at our neighbor's house looking at the TV show, something that was popular back then. And right at the beginning of the show, like it was, I think, 8 p.m., and the program stopped. All of a sudden, the news started, and we were seeing the host of the news saying that NATO alliances declared that they are going to attack Serbia from the air, and we need to collect our essentials and go to nearest shelter and try to hide from the bombing. And the craziest thing is that he actually said, "Don't panic."
The newscaster was saying, "Don't panic." You were hearing the noises as we opened up with the sirens, and we know that noise was being heard throughout all of Serbia. You were hearing that noise in the background and let's just get the picture for the News Rocky viewers here. You were actually sitting at some friend's house and watching a TV program. You were 11 years old. You were with your sister, who I think you told me was around 5 years old then?
5 years old, yes.
And your mom and your dad and the other family friends. And all of a sudden, the switch goes off, and the attacks are now being announced and coming.
Yes, that's right. So the panic is all that was happening at that time. So my mother took my sister, and I remember that we was running toward our house with no shoes. Like it was so panicking and stressful situation. So we, particularly because our house is placed near two military objects. It's very near. It's like 2 blocks away from our home. So we knew that they're going to aim those objects, but we were not sure when that is going to happen.
So tell the listeners, Jovana, tell the listeners, so where you are actually, you say you're really near one of the primary locations of these NATO attacks in the beginning. Explain why that is, that this location is maybe sought out as the original NATO attacks that you understand it today.
There wasn't attack at that places, but we were thinking that they are going to attack because the military was there. So we have two objects that are one across the street. It was very large. It was the part that military was prepared, had their trainings for the military.
So you live
So it
near the
was
training
full.
facility for your Serbian
Yes.
military, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes. So we were in a place that we were thinking about back then that it was going to hit for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So we were panicking, because of we didn't have the shelter and nowhere to hide. So that first night of after the bombing was declared, we were at our neighbor's basement.
So you're going to go into your neighbor's basement, and we'll bring up some photos of the
It's
location.
another basement.
Right.
The photos that I took for you is from another basement.
But
so
it's similar to, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So my family actually, and several other families from the neighborhood were in the basement only that night.
Okay.
So tomorrow, we had to find somewhere else to be.
A safe place to go.
Yes. So we didn't have specialized shelters for that kind of attacks. So my parents decided that it's safer place to be just to remove ourselves from those military objects. So it's not our neighbors, it's our friends, took us over. And that was the pictures that I will share with you today.
And that's where you went to after the first night of sleeping in this one basement. You then moved to a safer location, not near this military facility.
Safer.
Right.
Safer because it's a regular basement of the building.
Right.
The building has like 6 floors, and it was like the basement of the people that they are living in that building. So it's only for their old stuff to remove them. There no special protection, no anything. So now, when I think about it, if they in some place hit the building or someplace near the building, and the building will shut down, and I think that we will all be killed in the basement.
Okay. Do you know, thinking back, did that building that you slept in the first night, was there any injuries in that area after you had left that area?
No.
Okay.
No. Only the hospital was hit. The hospital was 2 blocks away from us. I will get into that a little bit later.
Sure.
So you will see on the pictures, the basement is basically the same as it was in 99. So I took those pictures today, and I got chills when I got into the basement because it all looked the same as it was. So it was a little places where we took our mattresses and put it on the floor. We didn't have bed down there, and we slept on the mattresses. Since it's the basement place, the only thing that we could see is like some small part of light and the bars over that. So basically,
how long, Jovana, I want to ask you in regards to the basement, you spent the entire 78 days in the basement, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So I just want the viewers to understand, you went from where you had a bedroom, your house that you lived in with a kitchen and, all the things that were normal to an 11-year-old and every human, right? And you then were forced as a family and the rest of your country to go into the basements of your properties. And so you were in there with other family members. Let me ask you, you just talked about your experience when you walked into that basement for those photos. And I really want to be sensitive to you, and if at any time you feel like you need to just take a break here or this is overwhelming, we can stop. So just know that this is not, I'm not trying to bring you into a place that is uncomfortable, but we're trying to expose to people, because I don't think the story, as many things that we can pull up on the Serbian story, it's hard to really understand unless you talk to someone like yourself who's gone through it. Let me ask you directly, as an 11-year-old, what was going on in your mind, just you? I want to know what you were thinking from that 24 hours of being in your friend's living room, watching a TV program, to the next day sleeping in a basement with the unknown?
It was crazy in my head and in all of our heads. Those are the people that I don't know, that I met, because all the families in the building, I can't remember exactly how many of them were in the basement at the same time. So it was crowded and we didn't have a place to sleep. So we getting to know each other, and along with the things that were happening in the basement, we often didn't have the electricity. As I said, we didn't have the internet, the smartphones, and something like that to take over your attention to, like, I don't know, watch some TV show or something else. We had a little radio. We were listening, the news on that radio. And when you see those holes between the places where we were sleeping, there were little tables on there, and we were sitting at the tables and playing some cards and trying to not lose our minds.
Do you remember, and in no way comparison to, but when we talked about it, like Anne Frank, the story of Anne Frank, where she and her family, obviously a different scenario, but somewhat similar in a sense that you as a child, you were sequestered into this hiding space. What were your parents like? What were the grown-ups acting like? Were they trying to keep you calm and safe, or did you see some nervousness in them?
Yes, of course, but that might be the strangest thing is in all this story, that life in Serbia for our grown-ups didn't stop. So kids weren't going to school, but our parents continued to work like every day as nothing is happening.
Even during these NATO attacks that ensued, people would get up every day, go to work,
Yes.
and come home. So the bombings, we know, as most of these bombings took place at nighttime, correct? When people
Yes.
were supposedly the NATO authorities, and that in cooperation with the American authorities, where there would be less civilian tragedies. We'll talk into that in a moment. But your family is in there in this room. What were you doing while mom and dad were at work all day? What were you doing in the basement? And who's caring for you?
Nobody. It was just like us kids playing around, trying to find some ways to entertain ourselves, to move focus on something else. We were knitting. I can clearly remember a knitting of bracelets. And after that, we were selling to our parents and our neighbors back then. And we were organizing some masking balls or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And all different kind of activities where we were able to go out from the basement. So during the day, it was we had some time to go out and socialize between ourselves. But during the nights, it was really frightening to be there.
Let me ask you, during the night, as you explain that to the listeners of News Rocky, and again, we have Jovana from the Serbian experience. She was 11 years old in 1999. Do you remember the first night you heard a bomb or anything, explosions or something close to your location?
Yes, I remember. The detonation and the explosion and window shaking. So it was the first time when we heard the bomb.
How many days was that in, Jovana?
I'm not sure, because Niš wasn't attacked in the first several days because it was too cloudy on our sky. So the planes couldn't reach their goals and couldn't see the exact aims. So they were skipped. They skipped us in the first several days. But after that, I can't be sure which day was it.
So this, you're kind of painting the picture here for the listeners, and I think for most of us, this is the first time we get to talk to someone who's gone through this experience. I think the closest correlation to America is 9/11. You know, it's the closest thing we've had to where we've had an attack. Of course, Pearl Harbor, but I think in modern day, 9/11 is an experience. And you know, as much as 9/11, believe me, I'm an American and patriot, and you know, I'm as angry and hurt about those attacks. I remember what happened. This is a different scenario. This is an attack that you, as a child, you had no clear understanding. And you know, I want to ask you: did your parents at the time? Did they understand what was going on? Did adults start talking like, well, this president of ours is doing this, or we're in this situation because of this thing between, you know, Croatia or between the Kurd, you know, this whole thing that was going on? When you look back in history, there was a lot going on in your nation and your neighboring nations. A lot of interest in oil, a lot of interest in control. What were your parents thinking? What were they sharing with you at the time to help ease your moments?
Well, I think that the talks between the grown-ups didn't take place in front of us. So they were like on the side, talking with our neighbors there, and just keeping us safe for not hearing all the news that were happening back then. So as for our president, to our people, it was presented as he did the thing that he needs to do to save our country. So it's a lot, it's a different topic. And back then it was like, we weren't angry on our president or something like that. We were only focused on the things that were happening us back with the bombing.
Understood. And so you were really kind of, in a way, have you and your parents, have you and your sister ever sat down and talked about this experience together, just one-on-one?
No.
Is it hard for you guys to even bring this up?
Yes. So the people of Serbia are not commenting a lot on that topic. It's only at the anniversary, once a year, that we speak about it. So between us that lived that, we don't speak about it. We don't talk about it. I remember when you brought up my sister right now, I remember my sister screaming and crying almost every single time when she heard the sirens. So at the end of the bombing, she heard one of sirens and didn't cry. And she was so proud of herself that she didn't cry about it. She was forcing us to tell everybody how she was. She was brave and not crying about it. And those are the things that I remember from that time.
Do you ever communicate with anybody that you were in that basement with? You had said that you had just met them, and a couple. How many families were in that basement?
Well, the building has actually 6 floors, and on every floor, I'm not sure, but I think it was 3 apartments, so 3 families per floor.
So how many kids do you think were in that building basement sleeping there?
Oh, I think it was like 15 children.
So did you become close with any of those folks, and do you stay in touch with them?
Well, actually, no. We were close in the years after the bombing, and we have each other on social media, but we didn't communicate. Actually, I contacted my friend in whose apartment we were, actually the basement, a few days ago, and he called me to arrange with me. He opened the basement for me to take the pictures, and he said to me, I didn't recognize your voice. It's a strange thing, really.
Yeah. You went through this experience with strangers, and
yes.
You know, in some way, forever, you always have this connection with them. And again, I refer to what we know as Americans and throughout the world. Serbia is really not well known. I think there's a lot of there's a lot of quietness around what goes on in those locations, and for purposes probably of governmental control. I want to kind of move into the feeling as an 11-year-old. Let's kind of talk this through, because I want to know what it's like to grow up one day the light switch goes off. You go from what's normal, the birds are chirping, it's spring, and you go into this experience where you're locked down and you have bombings taking place. How were you feeling? What was your emotion like for you that you recall? Maybe say halfway through this experience, were you becoming just so hardened by this experience, or did you get ready to break? I mean, do you remember? I mean, it's an amazing experience.
Well, no, the only emotion that I can recall from that time is fear. It was the constant emotion during the bombing, and that's all from the emotions.
Fear. If you heard sirens right now, what would that noise do to you?
Yeah, I told you that. Yeah. So a few years after the bombing, we had some military exercises in our town, and on the news and on the radio and all over the place was announced that the sirens will go again, but only the sirens that was for stop the attack. So we had two types of sirens. First one is for announcing air raid, and the other one is that we are not in the danger anymore at that time. So no airplanes on the radar, and we can go and move freely from one place to another. So when they announced that, they were only put the siren for stop the attack. But I can still remember the place where I was at that time when I heard the sirens. I can't even explain the feeling that I got. I got chills. I got fear. I was looking around like some instinctive reaction to just look around yourself to find something somewhere where you can hide. Looking around the people, it was all in seconds, but chills.
So this emotion obviously is rooted not just in you, but all of your people of Serbia. Let me ask, let's talk about this, your survival during the 7-8 days that you recall as an 11-year-old. Did you have food? Did you have, you said something about a radio, possibly for, that was the one thing you commented on. Did you have food? Did you have enough food and drink, water to survive?
Yes. Okay. Yes, we lived normal life as we could. So we didn't visit our house a lot. We were like here for 15 minutes once a week. So we could leave our stuff here and take another part of our stuff. And we didn't have the closet out there. So we needed to come from time to time to visit the home. And it was like 15 minutes, just pack things, move around and go.
Do you remember mom and dad, did they ever hit a point of stress that you recall, that they had enough of this?
No, I just remember my mother and my sister. It was like two situations. The first one is only with my mother. She was at her workplace at that time when the NATO planes hit hospital.
The NATO planes are flying in, dropping bombs on the on a hospital.
Yes,
and let me ask you though. Let me ask you, just so you know. So that hospital had civilians in it, correct?
Correct.
But the NATO attacks were because their intelligence was telling them that there was actually soldiers and or military there.
That's correct.
Talk a little bit about that.
So the soldiers were marked just few inches away from the hospital. So they were trying to hit the place where the soldiers were, but they attacked a hospital also, who is at that place.
And your mom was there, so talk.
My mom was on another place across the town, so she was on her way home to the basement, and she saw the explosion and fog, and she couldn't know if they. It looked like they hit the same place where the building was.
So she thought her
Because of
family had been killed because of the bombing, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And we didn't have cell phones. There is no way she could reach us until she was on the place.
How
the
far
same
was
place
that
where we
away in
were.
a walk, or I assume she was walking or driving? How
I think
far?
20 minutes.
So she
away.
had 20 minutes before she knew that her family was safe.
Yes, that's correct. And the other time, the other situation that took part there is my mother often took my sister to her job because I couldn't handle her all the time. I was a little girl and I couldn't save her and protect her from that stuff. And she took her to her workplace, and they were coming back from the work, and they were crossing the bridge. And at the same time, when you hear the sirens, you have in your head like 5 minutes to find a shelter and hide. So sometime we had like 40 minutes or 30 minutes until the first bomb was fell from the sirens. But sometimes they didn't see the plane at the time. So, for example, bomb hit the ground, and then after that we heard the sirens. So at the same time she was crossing the bridge, sorry, Netherlands were aiming our bridges often, and the siren started, and it was so stressful at that time because she didn't know where to go. So she was moving backward and forward on the bridge and trying to get some car to stop just to drive them to the nearest shelter. And if you just recall, I'm sorry,
It's okay.
to those situations, so people were panicking themselves and nobody wanted to stop. Nobody saw them. So my sister remembers the car, the yellow car, and the woman in the car who saw them, stopped and picked them up and drove them to the nearest building to hide. So those are those two situations with my mom and my sister.
And just so the listeners here at News Rocky, you know, we're talking with our special guest, Jovana from Serbia. We're talking about this one incident where your mom and sister, 5 years old, on this bridge. After they got off the bridge, moments later, what happened?
The bomb exploded and they hit that same bridge.
Same bridge where your mom and sister were.
Yes.
And if that yellow car hadn't stopped, yeah.
Well, you know.
That's the part of the story, I think, that we as Americans in the world really don't understand the significance to this. And, you know, I think it's quite convenient for the world we live in today, where we do have technology, we have cell phones, we have the ability to see things real time. But back then, it was really what media and political authorities wanted us to see.
Yeah.
You know, I gotta tell you that we're getting close to an hour mark here, about maybe 10 minutes or so before we hit the hour mark. I think this is going to be a 2-part episode if you're up for it. And so what I'll do is we wrap up this first episode here. I want to stay just in the side that you remember, your memory, your experiences. I want to ask you, what changed you? What changed you personally from this experience? What do you think maybe you would have been? Maybe what you are, and you're an amazing person. So don't think I'm belittling that. I'm just saying something happened. But what changed you, and what do you feel like, you know, it's unfair? So give me your feelings on that.
Well, personally, I think nothing changed me because I didn't lose anybody, a loved one or a friend or acquaintance or something like that. So it's my luck in all that situation. Personally, I think I didn't change, but the life in Serbia was never the same after that. So you had people with the fear of the planes. We have airport here in Niš. For a long time, it was only a military airport, and years after that, when we heard the planes in the sky, we was like shaking and had chills and something like that. So I would say maybe the fear of the planes and the fear of sirens, and that got into my bones, and I think I will never lose that feeling.
Do you think you and the rest of your people, and of course anyone that was born after 1999, you know, this experience of 7 8 days, it's hard. They probably hear about it. It's historic. I'm sure it's talked about, but to actually go through the experience has changed everyone in your nation. How do you think the rest of the country has rebounded from this situation as far as economically, emotionally, and sort of, do you think as a people, has it made you just harder and sort of tougher and almost accept if this was to come back to your country today? It's almost like you hear the sirens. You've had that experience. That has made a change in you. What do you think it's done to the rest of your country, though?
Well, I think it's from person to person. Our economy is destroyed so many times. Actually, a few years before the bombing, we had disastrously great inflations, and we had other wars going on our soil. So we're like, I don't know, phoenixes here. And I like to call us a magician, because we find a way and manage to pull out together and just continue with our lives.
It's hard as, we've talked now a couple times about this subject, and, I learn a little new, something new each time, and you're opening up about this is amazing. And, I hope that the listeners of News Rocky, I hope the people that take advantage of sitting down, and we're going to try to get as many people in the world to listen to your story. I think it's important for people to understand you were 11 years old when this happened. I mean, it's almost as if you go from playing on a playground to one day hearing sirens, not really knowing why. And the course of your life as a child now has changed after 7 8 days. Now you've rebounded perfectly, and you found your ability to go back to school. You talked about your dancing, and we'll probably get into that here as we close up the show. I want to hear about what have you been doing since you were 11. Tell the listeners sort of, what have you been doing? You told you went to school, you're studying for law, you're also trying to do some other stuff, but you were a dancer. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, about the dancing part.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You were a professional dancer, right?
Sorry?
You were a professional dancer.
Yes, I'm a professional ballroom dancer. So I was practice dance from my, I think, second grade to 10 years after that. So the dance is my passion and the big part of my life. I took places in some competitions over there, over here actually in Serbia, and in some international competitions. I practiced that for 10 years, as I said. So I stopped when I was in high school. So I couldn't manage anymore my obligations at school and in dancing. So I decided to stop dancing professionally. But from time to time, I like to go back in the ballroom dancing place here and to remember myself on that times. I have videos about it, and from time to time, I watch it again.
So I asked that question because I wanted to sort of ask this question again. The path you were on up until these 78 days of this NATO attack could have been different. You could have had a different pathway into dancing. I mean, is that fair to say?
Well, yes. In some way, yes.
It changed your life.
Yes, it changed my life because we were not be able to do our activities, normal activities.
Right.
And after that, months took us to rebound the buildings around us, our heads and our economy and everything else that was happening after that. We had year after that, we had some serious problems with our government here, and we took over, and our back then president on the 5th October in 2000.
Okay.
Yes, so it's never boring here.
It sounds that way. So as we're wrapping up, you brought up the president, and I definitely want to get into the political side of this NATO 78-day attack on Serbia and its people. I do want to bring you back, and hopefully the listeners, I'm pretty sure they will. I think your story is one that folks won't be able to turn off. So I want to ask you, do you mind coming back for another hour interview? If you don't mind, we'll actually end this one here. And get you ready, and we'll bring you back in for tomorrow's interview if you're okay with that.
Yeah, it's absolutely fine.
Okay. Well,
and thank you.
Thank you. And so again, we had Jovana from Serbia who was sharing her story with us. And, News Rocky, we're taking on the news of the day, drilling down on fake news, all that stuff that we talk about each and every day. We have some pretty unique guests. We've had Alex Jones. We've had some really amazing guests slotted to come in here. But I got to tell you, I'm more amazed by this real story. This is a story about tragedy, about and politics, and quite frankly, in the next segment that you're going to tune in and hear about fake news, about the news from political parties, about the news from NATO, about the news actually from our then president, Bill Clinton. And actually about the news of our now president, Joe Biden. You see, Joe Biden, he sat on he was the chair of foreign affairs. He actually had direct control, and his involvement in this attack on Serbia has a long history. And in fact, we're going to get into it with Jovana when we get back on this next episode and talk a little bit about what they fear about Joe Biden's presidency. And actually, we'll even ask how they felt during the former president, Donald Trump, and what it was like to be in Serbia over his 4 years serving as president of the United States. Guys, thank you for tuning in to News Rocky today. Please, this is a 2-part series. You need to make sure you tune in tomorrow and get the rest of the story from Jovana in Serbia. Thank you.